Hello and welcome to the Wealth Tech Insider. I'm clearly not Danny Legrand. You are stuck with Peter Warren today for a change, maybe not a welcome change, but I've taken over the mic today to do something a little bit special. So I'm very delighted to entice my business partner and friend, Aron Satchell, away from the cave of building software and solutions and actually getting the job done at Finura to come and have a chat about our story. We are on the cusp of our fourth birthday at Finura, a little bit longer, incorporated, but operational for 4 years now. And I think it's a good thing for a business to reflect at certain points of time on the journey. And so Aron and I were chatting a few weeks ago. We thought, well, just kind of interesting to document some of the things we've been through because you start to forget after a while. So firstly, welcome, Aron. Good to have you on the show.
Thank you. Good to be here. Do a lot of podcasting, so it's actually good to feature on a podcast from time to time.
Aron he's actually right in the middle of doing our 2701 audit renewal at the moment, so it wasn't hard to coax you away, mate. From that, was it?
It's a good opportunity to get away from that and think about something else other than security controls. Absolutely.
So I guess, mate, we're documenting this, I guess, for two reasons. One is maybe people are interested. I don't know. There might be people out there thinking of starting a business. And so often it's good to share some of the learnings that we've had along the way. But I reckon, mate, it's good to do this for ourselves. You know, we'll be old someday. And if our kids are ever even slightly interested in what happened in the future, maybe they might watch this someday. You never know.
It's a digital time capsule. It's not one that you plant in the ground anymore and then dig up in years to come.
That's right. So why don't we just sort of go back to the beginning, mate. So tell me, refresh me of how we met the first day. I'm trying to remember.
So 4 years in, Finura now, but I think for you and I, mate, it's actually closer to sort of 10, nearly 11 years, right? Doing business together, working together, right? So I think, Finura's obviously been around for 4 years now, which is good and great to probably share some of that insight, on this pod today. But, Pete and I, we met in a former business in Zumo prior, many years prior to Finura, and I think Pete and I we'd never met each other before, and so it was a baptism by fire almost. I think we were coming into a business, and we each sort of had our own sort of responsibilities and probably expectations coming into that business, and I think that was we met together probably 11 years ago I think now at Zumo, and I do remember that there was a moment, and depends on how far we're going to go back, but we were having some banh mi at that little place up the road around the corner.
Oh, yeah.
And I think we were sort of sitting there going, one day, what have we got ourselves into? What is this? What's going on here over at banh mi? And thinking about what was happening at that time, but also what the future might hold as well. I think that for me is a point in time I remember quite clearly sitting there going, what are we on to here? What are we doing?
I think everyone has an oh shit moment in any new job, and you're often looking for either a bit of salvation, that it's not just you who feels that way. And I feel like I got even luckier because I found someone who was asking the same questions that I was. So I remember being able to confide in you at that point about some of those doubts about what the hell was the plan in this business was very useful to me. I reckon it might have kept us there longer than we might have otherwise stayed, mate, if I'm honest. We sort of instantly connected, got on well together. We liked the team as well. That was a big part of it too, right? But, not an uncommon thing to happen. And for we won't go too much into detail because a lot of it's ancient history, but Zumo had listed on the ASX. So I'd gone from being a really small sort of business with had a couple of founders, husband and wife, and another CEO. And had gone on a pretty aggressive growth trajectory. And anyone that's done that or watched companies that have done that, it usually goes two ways, either spectacularly well or spectacularly bad. There's not really a middle ground. And Zumo certainly had its challenges in the early days. But I sort of reflect on those challenges. And the interesting thing about it was the core business was great. The day-to-day of what you and I managed was awesome. We had a remarkable team. And to this day, those people are still in the industry doing great work, which is so awesome to see. It was just the growth aspirations were just a bit beyond the business's capability, and there was just too much risk, frankly. And I guess maybe early days, mate, that was there was an acquisition in the middle of that too, right? Which probably taught us some early lessons.
Complicates things, absolutely. I think we both each finished our MBAs in the year prior or the couple of years prior, and so I think we were quite book smart, and we sort of thought about in a case study sense, this is how these things should go. But I think the reality is a very different one, right? When you're in the middle of it all and watching it all play out. And but the enduring thing, I think the enduring, thing for me out of that was absolutely team. Yeah. And so I think, it's great that we've got a number of our existing team at Finura now who we've worked with a long time in the Inzumo business, but they've come along on the journey with us in Finura. And I think, I'm absolutely humbled by the fact that we've got those people on our team and that we can have that, they have that trust in us to continue the journey together, which is awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't take it lightly, do you?
No.
But at this point, it's on them. They know enough about us to know what they were getting into. But I guess, so that journey in Zumo, there was probably two stages of that, Aaron. I think, well, maybe three. So stage one was sort of get in and work out what the hell was going on, and again, there was more turmoil to follow, which we won't dig through. But a lot of those people that started the business were left fairly shortly after we had arrived, and that created some uncertainty. But stage two was really important, I thought, because you and I sort of pushed past that point of, we should just get out of this house that's on fire. When we sort of stayed together for some, I think we were joined at the hip at that point. And I don't know, things were going really well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was really good. Those middle years were really good. And I think we were there for sort of 5 or 6 years, right? And so I think the back half was quite memorable in my mind. I think that we were sort of left with something that we had to take over and really sort of drive and grow. And I think that, not only did the team invest their trust in us at that time, but the board as well. And I think we spent a lot of time working with a new management and a new board. I think that taught us a lot. Certainly taught us a lot about operating in a listed environment, that's for sure. There's a small cap, micro cap, all the sort of trappings that come with that. But just meeting other people along the way. I think there were definitely the founders of the other business that was acquired. There was board members who we had very little interaction with at that point in time. And that extended into the back half of the Inzumo story as well, where it was then subsequently acquired again. So, yeah, there was definitely a lot of learnings there.
Yeah. I mean, I sort of remember the board being a really distant, far off thing we didn't know much about, and you'd hear really secondhand. But then once that sort of storm had played out, we were regular features of the board meeting. We'd come along and it became quite a constructive relationship once broke through barriers. And, I think it is a good juncture to sort of call out, a guy called Brendan Burwood came in to be CEO of that business. He was an outsider, but a very accomplished businessman in his own right. I still don't know why he took the job, Aaron. It seemed like
still baffles me.
He's still sort of the guy who could have done anything he wanted in the world, but he took that on. I'm eternally grateful that he did, though, because I think he gave us the clear air, but the mentoring and probably a bit of the confidence and belief to try some different things and back ourselves in, which is pretty unusual for a listed CEO to do.
Yeah, and so much of we sort of left to sort of operate the business as we wanted, right? Within the sort of, the strategy, the guideline, I think that was really good. And I think Brendan and the board saw, the benefit of that, right? I think they invested trust in us, to be able to get that done. I think given the track record, the history, it was definitely good. So.
And so, we put out the fire, then rebuilt the house a bit, and then the house was put up for sale. So that was probably the third phase. So do we want to reflect on this part?
Yeah. Pretty interesting sort of situation where you're in the organisation that you're effectively running, but then at the same time it's put up for sale. So I guess it's a bit like being a renter in a house that gets put up for sale in some respect, right? Isn't it? I think by that time we felt, personally, I think I felt quite connected to the business, having been there that long, 5 or 6 years at that point, and that we built something quite unique team-wise, but also we were making some really good headway from a product standpoint. I thought we had, really good product and service which was already recognised in the market, but I think we were doing some things that were quite unique at that time, and we were pushing into some new areas, which is great. So you felt connected to it. You felt that you really wanted to sort of take that on and do something with it. So yeah, it's something we obviously threw our hat into the ring as part of that sort of acquisition process, that purchasing process, so which ultimately was unsuccessful, unfortunately. But I guess you could sort of look at it two ways, couldn't you? You could say, well, we were pretty wedded to the team, and I think that's the driver. We've reloaded the team. We thought that, if we could acquire the business and we could bring the team with us on that journey, that would be a really good starting point. But at the same time, it wasn't meant to be, and thus that's why Finura was born, right? So, yeah.
Oh, look, I reflect. I think we were probably a little irrationally attached to the business, if I'm honest. That's probably my reflection. I still remember, I don't know, mate, I reckon if you went through our Slack channel digest at that point in time, we'd be a bit remorseful, probably with some of the emotions we were having, which I think were pretty irrational. We sort of forgot probably a bit of advice out there to people who are wired like us, who get fully invested in something. Like if it's not your business, it's not your business, was probably my lesson there. We were ultimately just employees, albeit valued employees, I suppose. But at the same time, like I do, if I look at that juncture, like when word was out that the business was for sale, we had a lot of people approach us, which was interesting. And some of those people we still talk to and have been a big help to us at Finura. But I think the advice that we were given, there was lots of advice, some of it helpful, some not so helpful. But one of the best bits of advice was never pay for yourself, was probably the best one, right? So, so there was an opportunity at one point. I think we had an opportunity to potentially match what the buyer was going to pay. We'll go $1 higher, I think it was the opportunity. And what do? We didn't think about it too long, did we?
Not really. I think we sort of looked and went that. Look, I think that there was obviously some emotions prior to that point, but I think we were quite rational in saying, actually, what if we're going to spend that capital, then we would probably do something else. And because it's return on investment, and I think we just said, what we can, because we had pretty, solidified plans as well around, if not this, then what will we do in the future? And I'd be good to, unpack that a little bit soon, but we just sort of thought, what, we should just start ground up. And maybe that was a little bit naive because you sort of go, okay, we're going to start brand new and that's all new and exciting and really, really shiny. By year two, the reality settles in terms of what that means, starting something afresh from new and building from the ground up. It is exciting, it's shiny, but at the same time, bloody hard work, right? So it's not easy.
Yeah. But so, fast forward that period, we had a little thing in the middle of it, a little global pandemic just thrown in the mix, mate, to make things even more interesting.
100%. Yeah, I remember you drawing concentric circles around your house, working out how far you were able to leave your house and go for a walk and meet with Conrad Travers at the time, so you could both meet in the park in the middle, right? So
we did do that. Yeah, Conrad and I had many, we would call them mental health walks around the park. I'm very grateful for my friendship with Conrad. It definitely helped me. And he was on the same journey. He was sort of started his business 2 years prior. So he was sort of right in the middle of it.
Yeah. You and I had seen each other for 18 months. So that's something that stands out in my mind, that we started something new. And whilst we'd sort of worked together at that point for 6 years or thereabouts, we were starting something new from the ground up. And I think for the first 18 months, we didn't see each other face to face. It was all done entirely remotely. So how many businesses were started during COVID entirely remotely? It comes with its own unique challenges, right?
Yeah. But at the same time, I'm sort of grateful because I think, getting an office wasn't a priority and clients were willing to engage us from the start on
Absolutely.
remote, and we didn't have to pay for travel, mate, which turns out quite expensive. So let's just sort of rewind back to day one at Finura. I still remember turning on the computer that morning. I think you started a week ahead of me. I can't remember. Who started the first week ahead of each other? I can't remember. You or me?
Probably me, mate. Yeah. You had a bit of a period to serve out, so.
I did have a little bit of time in the garden. I forgot about that. That's what happens when you're the sales guy. You tend to get put in the garden for a little while, but that's okay. So anyway, long story short, day one, we start Finura, and we had a bit of unexpected, I call it luck. Other people might call it something else, but we had a couple of relationships that we'd sort of sown the seeds on and our history that sort of came to us and said, look, I heard you're doing something new. We need some help. Could you come and talk to us? So I do want to call out our first client, which was Colonial First Date. And so particularly John Keating and Dave Pritchard, always eternally grateful for those two fellas for, I think, avoiding some internal pressure to use one of the big four management consulting firms and try out a little business called Finura. So you remember that clearly?
Yeah, it was good. Great engagement. They were really awesome to work with, and interesting work as well. I think, one of the things that we wanted to do when we started Finura was actually, do something a little bit uniquely different and, not just stick to our heritage, which obviously is X-Plan that we're still very close to right now, but, think about doing something different. And, that engagement gave us an opportunity to do that. I mean, obviously it was platform, there was an investment platform work there, but it was actually more about connecting ecosystem fintechs into the platform and working with some international software vendors. And so it was really interesting work, right? I think, good opportunity to work with those guys, but the broader CFS team at that time as well, through that exercise. So it was a couple of years worth of work, which is great. Like, I think it was interesting, and it enabled us to sort of, really start to begin to scale the business, right? And I think then I have to go back and look at the records. I can't remember if it was Casper or Danny. I can't remember which order it was, but, I think Danny then really, spent a good chunk of her initial time at Finura working with the guys there at CFS on the back end of that.
So I guess people often might ask, what was the business plan when we started? And I've got a view. I'll chip in. I'll let you respond. But I have a view that we were a lot clearer on what we didn't want to be than what we wanted to be. So we didn't want to be an X-Plan support business like in our old world. We kind of knew what we didn't want to look like in terms of a culture and a business. But at the same time, we were probably less clear on the what and the services we'd provide and where we're heading. We had ideas. And I guess a bit of it was the business plan that we thought we'd run with in Zumo when we took it over. But long story short, I feel like the business plan, honestly, was just getting enough clients so we could recruit in the team we wanted.
Yep. Yeah, I think early days was all about team. I think that we knew that if we had the right team around us and that founding team, that there was no shortage of ideas. It was really around the priority of those ideas and, quite frankly, what we could execute on. And so I do remember early days that we were thinking about team. We were thinking about who, would be able to come on board. And it was a mixture of, obviously skills, obviously, but, just cultural fit. Because again, it was the middle of COVID at that point. And so, enticing people to come and work for an entirely remote organisation in the middle of a global pandemic is a pretty tall order, right? And take the risk.
Run by two blokes with 5 cents to run
exactly
together.
Right. With very little funding, right? And the team was everything, because I think we learned that at Zoom, and we knew that the team would be the thing that differentiates us in the future. And I think we had some ideas, right? Like we knew that we wanted to do something that was more sustainable, and that was either content based, and there was a content style business, obviously into advice and wealth, but software was the heart of it as well. And I thought we were thinking that if we were thinking about doing something different from a software standpoint, it was sort of learning the lessons of the many startups and the many businesses that have built software in this space, and taking some of those learnings from our former world, but doing it in a way that worked really tightly with the ecosystem. I think, we're in such a narrow vertical. We just knew that if we were going to build something, which, as it has become Advice Designer, we had to do it in a really collaborative way. And we had to not just get team. The other thing we were thinking about, now reflecting back on it, was who around the outside of the business would be there to support us, because we just knew that we weren't going to be able to hire an army of software developers to do this, and so that we would have to partner with some people outside the business too.
Yeah. So that's probably the unknown, the bit that some people know now when we released that product, but probably not a lot of people knew when we were sort of building the services business, known as the Finura consulting business, was we were actually building two businesses at the same time. So we were building a software company and also a consulting services company. And the consulting company kind of paid the bills, so to speak, and didn't necessarily pay our personal bills for a while. And at this juncture, I would like to acknowledge Rachel and Catherine, our wives, who kept our family P&Ls afloat whilst Finura was bootstrapping itself initially. And we're always grateful to those two for their support and believing in us. And we'll pay you back one day, ladies, we promise. But more importantly, it was that sort of getting that cadence right between building the two businesses. So I remember your days, mate. You were sort of daytime on the tools, helping me in the consulting business. And nighttime, you were spinning up wireframes for Advice Designer, working out what the hell we were going to build.
Absolutely, yeah. And even now, there's a lot of task switching, right? Like, again, that's one of the challenges we have. You're a small organisation, you're on the tools doing one thing, but at the same time, you've got to be focused on the many other things, right? And back to team understand that. Like, I think our team are pretty good at doing that as well. They know that we've got to be flexible. I think that's a trait that we really, really like.
Yeah. We no one has particular hats or
roles.
Everyone's in the sales team, everyone's in the support team. You just got to be that way when you're running two businesses. But I think because the team we were all pretty clear on the vision, and I think the only thing we ever had to sign in blood, Aaron, was that we weren't going to be an X-Plan support business.
Excellent support business. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, that was the only non-negotiable by the team, which was cool because we actually had lots of partners, and we still referred a lot of business to our old company in Zumo, and there was a role for that in the market, so that was good.
Yeah.
But I think the thing that was quite cool about the consulting business was we just knew intuitively the advisors technology world was bigger than just X-Plan or Advisor Logic or whatever the software was. And so the thing I love, and particularly Danny sowed the seeds, the foundations for this, was actually that having a tech strategy and implementing it was a whole thing that no one had ever done before in the industry. Like, this is a new segment, I think, that, I mean, she and the team had built out effectively.
Putting structure around it, not being solution first focused, thinking more broadly. I think reflecting sort of 4 years on now from the initial engagements we were doing to now, like, I think the discussions have definitely shifted, right? Like, it used to be technology focused sort of discussions, and obviously tech is still a very core part of that, but I think up front now we spend a lot of time on strategy, operational design. Like, there's all these components that really impact how effective the technology is. And it's interesting, like, we worked with a client this week, and Simon, who's only just new to our team, just watching him go through, his pitch to that client, it's very different perhaps to what we would have done in the early years, because it is focused on those other areas there. And I think we just deliver, more value focused to the practice across the board in terms of, because there is no, Danny, so this is no silver bullet to the technology you're using. It's just how you apply that and how you implement that right. I think it's good. It's good to see our maturity sort of shift over time around how we deliver that advice.
Yeah. So you sort of touched on this bit before about partners, but we had a lot of help in the early days. And so I do want to call out, some, and I think we've always been hungry for feedback and counsel, I suppose, on what we can be doing better and where we can learn. And we certainly learned from clients. I think that was an important part, but we also had some other people around us. So you mentioned Vox. So I'm kind of curious. Not a lot of people will know about Vox, Aron, but probably good to talk about that relationship and how it started in the early days, because it's been an important one for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I think it looks like Vox is a software development partner we have that help us build and maintain advice designers. So we're eternally grateful to those guys. They're a little bit like you and I, mate. We're just two young blokes running a business. I mean, they've been running their business a bit longer than we have, right? But I think the thing that we kicked off really early with them was similar ethos. Like we had young families. We're similar ages. We have similar values to each other. And I think, while you and I can share sort of, the internal challenges of running a newly formed business, we share that with them as well in terms of, our similar trajectories and journeys. So I think you bumped into them in the early days through another engagement. And I
Mutual
think
client.
and then we just knew straight away that, these were our guys. These are the people that we wanted to work with in that. And I think we'd start having conversations with them around that we wanted to build a web app and the sorts of things that we wanted to do. And perhaps they were a little bit naive. They said, "Oh yeah, it'll be easy. It's simple. It's really that integration stuff. No, piece of cake. It's really good." And at that point, Casper and I are sort of saying, "Guys, just strap in, because actually it's not as straightforward as you might think otherwise, right?" Yeah. And we've worked together now, obviously for 4 years, right? And it's been a great relationship. So. But it works well. We had to rely on them externally because there's obviously just a whole lot of expertise and things they know that we would never be able to be across. And and they bring different perspectives, working across all sorts of different industries, not just fin services. We can be in a bubble sometimes, right? Just thinking about fin services. So it's good. It's good to work with those guys. But dynamic, I think they think like we do. They understand quick decision making, and that's good. It's not that rigid.
We never exchanged PowerPoint slides.
We don't. Yeah, there's no PowerPoint.
In fact,
slides.
we didn't exchange. We did contracts for quite a while, if I remember.
Yeah,
rightly.
I think early days we were bootstrapping, right? And I think there was just a really good, tight understanding between the two businesses that it's a long-term partnership. And so they committed to it. Yeah, it was good.
It's a gentleman's agreement between four, maybe five gentlemen. But I couldn't think of many other businesses. I mean, look, because people ask us, "Gee, did you do an RFP? How'd you find your software partner?" And we didn't, did we?
There was no RFP. No, I think it was over coffee and over a couple of breakfasts, and we sort of, just got to know them, which is good, right? And I think it was trust. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And so we, I don't think we were a little creative. So we've obviously done a long-term deal with them now, and they're part of our success. We're hoping. So there's a lot of skin in the game and buy-in, and I think that's, and I think they would have done a great job no matter what. But I feel like that's probably helped the relationship, because now they're already seeing some success, and it was quite satisfying, giving them a bit of money recently for what we achieved, and over and beyond what we had to pay them, and that it was new for them to work like this as well.
Yeah, and we're not an old client. We're probably a little bit overbearing in some things. We've got a very defined view of what we want delivered and how we wanted to go about doing it, right? So I think that was a challenge for them to sort of work with perhaps a little bit different client. Yeah.
What do you think was the toughest part in the first 3 or 4 years for you?
Look, I think being all things to all parts of the business, right, was a constant challenge. I think one minute we spoke a little bit about it, we're on a client engagement and you're giving your all to that, like you're really committed to making sure we're delivering good value and deep insight. But then at the same time, you're often building software at the same time and doing payroll and finance and all the other things that need to get done, right? And we both probably haven't spoken about it enough, but we have young families, right? Like we had our second child during this piece. So did Casper, actually. He had a second child. And so it's pretty tough to be able to sort of balance all those sort of, it's not a 9 to 5 job because we're not working in an office, right? It's always on. We've got to be there for family as well, right? Like they were tough. I think So knowing that always on, that task switching piece is a real challenge. Just uncertainty in environment as well. Like I think talking to you earlier and maybe this week, and that things that we grappled with in those early days was, we're building this, and we had conviction in what we were building from a software perspective. But the regulatory environment and, a lot of tech sort of environment things were shifting around us as well. Like we started building, we had this idea for advice designer pre-Gen AI, like ChatGPT didn't exist. Yeah, like wasn't even a notion that there would be this amazing, wave of technology innovation.
Well, we actually thought of the idea. So Brendan Burr gave us this idea. It was a really good exercise. I encourage business owners to give it a crack. The whole idea for advice designer was spawned on a whiteboard when we were asked the question: if you could design a product which would completely blow up and disrupt your business model, what would it look like? It was kind of the genesis question, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's counterintuitive, right? Like you spend a lot of business spend time trying to defend their moat, right? Like it's 100%, yeah. So and as a DBFO happened partway through that as well. We had a new government at that time elected, and there was this notion that SOAs would disappear. There'd be no document that would be delivered to the customer, and I thought, maybe you and I getting on the phone when the draft legislation got leaked and went, do we just need to put a nail in this? Do we need to just stop what we're doing? And I think, so there was some nervousness around that, right? Like we'd set off on a journey, and obviously at that point in time, spent a lot of time, effort, and money getting to where we had been. But I think the thing, which we fell back on was that, no, we really do need to be resolute. We set out on this journey to build something that was different and valuable. And even if DBFO, and useful, and even if DBFO at that time does get legislated, that we'd pivot into something that would continue to be really valuable on the other side of that. And I think we have the same view now with Gen AI. Obviously, ChatGPT updates overnight, custom connectors, all sorts of things. All for a different podcast, I'm sure, but we sort of we grapple with that daily, right, in a product sense and thinking about it. Yeah.
And we had some great advice along the way, and I would, again, we never have a board. Like we never had I think we had board meetings, Aaron, but we just sort of, someone signed, we minute them and they're done. But, we always say the board meets daily, sometimes hourly, to talk about that. But we did have some counsel from outside. And so I think whether you're a solopreneur or in our situation, I think it's always very helpful to have some people, a kitchen cabinet, for lack of a better term, who you can call on and ask for opinions. And for me, there was probably three people who I think were pretty instrumental. So one was Jason Entwistle and Greg Hansen from Hub, who we got to meet actually when Inzumo was for sale. They kind of reached out. I knew Greg from the past, but and I think because Jason in particular has been on a similar journey to us as an entrepreneur and is now a very successful businessman, he was great in the sense that he said, look, this whole belief in the convictions of the founder, and actually you're actually truly solving a problem which needs to be solved here, guys. Keep at it, was kind of the feedback and the guidance every step of the way. And always eternally grateful for those two for their support.
No, I'm going, yeah.
Pretty rare to find kind of big corporate guys that get startups in that sense.
But understand that, yeah. And a focus on, or have got visibility of the problems we're solving. In that space between Inzumo and Finura, I remember that we did speak to a lot of people. We were out talking to a lot of different organisations, even outside of Fin Services, and we were exploring funding when we were going through that initial piece of work as well. And so we spoke to a lot of people, and I think it was great to strike up the relationship with those guys because they, unlike a lot of the other people we spoke to, they got the latent need from an industry standpoint, and probably had a lot of insight into things that had been done and perhaps not worked as well. And lessons. Definitely lessons fed into our thinking, which is really good.
Yeah. And probably the other one was, he'll be embarrassed if I mention his name, but Peter McCarthy, I think, was an enormous help to you and I as well. So for those that don't know who Pete is, he's the founder of My Prosperity. We actually met through our consulting work. So Finura started referring a lot of clients to My Prosperity, by far and away the leading client portal in the market. So I think Danny was their number one salesperson for a while there, but glad to do it because it's such a good product. But Pete and I sort of struck up a conversation a couple of times, and then we had quite a few dinners, Aaron, didn't we, with Pete, and catch-ups and my hookups, debates. He never went public with his predictions, but many of my predictions that have now become either loved or hated in the industry. The things we put out there were spawned on the back of a few late night chats with Pete. But I just think to talk to someone that's been on the journey that we have been on, albeit 10 years on from us, 10 years ahead of us, and all we did was just feverishly take notes and try not to make the same mistakes that he made.
Yeah.
Was the goal. Yeah.
He's pretty candid, right? Like it was great to have such a candid sort of counsel where he called out just, shit that went wrong for him.
Yeah.
And if he had his time again, just would avoid. And I think they're the things that we took a lot of notes on, in a software sense, but also a business sense, right? Yeah.
And that, like, I think that it's for me, it was probably the lesson I got, and you've always been good on this, but it's resisting the urge to let the market build your product for you.
Yeah.
I know this is counterintuitive, and I reckon I still battle this as we carve our path.
It's difficult.
But
it's hard. Yeah. I think if you, you got to look. There's obviously a fine line to walk, right? But if you just did everything for all people, you become just really quite irrelevant. I think that's the risk that all software companies run, software solutions run. And Pete hammered that home a lot, I think, in their conversations. Perhaps not in the wealth space, but accounting, right? Like I think there was a lot of exposure he had to accounting software, FYI docs, and some of those other businesses, and what it was good to hear from him what they had done, ecosystem sense of what they'd done right, and obviously Xero, which is a powerhouse, and try and replicate those learnings, replicate what they've done in that space there.
I think the lesson he was pretty open. He's, they talking about losing a couple of years almost to chasing a strategy
opportunities
because the market was pulling them a certain way, and he knew it wasn't right, and he didn't trust his gut, but he went with it because the sales team told him to. And all you can ever do, I think, to your mentors is just pay them the courtesy of actually following their advice and not repeating those mistakes. We're finding all new ones, mate, aren't we? But at least we'll try not to make
not repeat them. That's for sure. Yeah. Yeah, it'd be an interesting book. You're right. One of our team said to us, "Here's lessons learned." I said, "Oh, Pete and I are not ready to write that book just yet. I think that'll be something we do in time." So
no, I guess probably not a bad place to wrap up though, Aaron. So if you sort of reflect on, the journey that's got us here. I mean, what for you are the key lessons that if you were coaching yourself a decade ago, what would you have told yourself now?
The key one is pace yourself. There's no overnight success. I think there's a lot of when you look across the industry, and there's a lot of conversation on social media around success, but it's not overnight success. It's been 10 years in the making. And I think you've got to pace yourself. You've got to be ready for that almost marathon. That's probably the thing. I was impatient early years. Yeah.
We are pretty impatient.
It's a good thing. It's a good thing to be impatient, but you've got to also be realistic about working at it and the consistent, things you have to turn up with every day to just keep moving forward, And so it's not a grind. I would trade it in any day of the week.
Nah.
You've got to be consistent. You've got to really just drive hard on it. And that's the thing. You've got to be prepared for that. I think.
Yeah, I reckon I agree with that one wholeheartedly. I think that consistency piece is critical. And, mate, you do get distracted. There's a lot of noise, particularly in tech.
Yeah.
So we'd always hear rumours of people raising capital and all these big deals happening. And
look over your shoulder.
I remember a particular company that at one point tried to acquire us or merge us and give us all this stock, and then was in voluntary administration 6 months later. And you and I going, this just sounds like a pile of bullshit.
If it sounds too good, it is too good.
So that's probably my one, is to trust your gut. I feel like you and I particularly, because we are different personality profiles, but between us, hopefully a yin and a yang, generally between the two guts, have a pretty good sense of what's right and wrong and what feels right and feels wrong. And I reckon 9 times out of 10, when we've gone down a path around something, we just kind of knew from the start it wasn't probably going to work.
Yeah.
But we didn't have the courage to say no.
Yeah.
And it's bloody hard when you're in a small business, because it's hard to say no to clients, and it's hard to say no to things, hard to say no to people.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably the scar tissue I think you've got to just accumulate by, walking through a bit of shit sometimes.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. But anyway, mate, 4 years in and many, many more to go. So we had a planning day with our team not so long ago, and we talked a lot about a very long-term vision for the business, an enduring vision. For those that don't quite know how we're structured, Finura Group, it is a group now. So we have 2 effective businesses moving forward, our software business and our consulting services business. And there may be other things in the future. Who knows? But the thing we do want to do is, the thing I know is, I wouldn't work with anyone else. I wouldn't work with any other team. I want to grow our team, but not too much. What's our golden rule?
Sensibly.
No HR,
Yeah.
no HR people.
No HR people.
Then we're too big.
We're
We've
too
started a
big.
company.
Well, there's an intimacy with the team, right? I think we know each other, we know our families really well. And I think that trust is what makes us unique, makes us work,
Yeah.
makes us tick. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think empathy. I
Deserve
mean,
that.
everyone's talking work-life balance, and anyone that wants work-life balance, don't start your own business. That concept is horseshit. Work and life are blended, and the blend will be sometimes very strong on one or the other.
Yep.
But
It shifts
if
back
you're
and
all
forth.
in it together,
Yeah.
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 All right, mate. Well, let's
Look forward to part two.
put this one in the can, and I think next let's have a talk more about product and where we're heading, because I think you and I don't talk about this enough. I think we are very much in the day-to-day, and we've done a lot, but I'm kind of curious on what's happening moving forward. And so we'll talk about that in episode 2. So thanks, Aron. Thanks for coming out of the cave. Talk to us, mate. Hope that wasn't too painful for you. We'll lock this one away. And episode 2, we will talk a bit more about where we're headed as a business and from a product and strategy point of view, and talk a bit more about the broader technology market. So thanks for listening to the Wealth Tech Insider. As usual, lots of great resources on our website, finuragroup.com. Including our tech health insights, tech health check, I should say, where you can get a custom report for your practice on how your technology is going. So hope you enjoyed the episode, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks,